Hey, what is going on? Butch here. I am going to do a video of the 21 things you need to know about Geminis. I'm going to do a video for each sign. Gemini is just the first. I feel like because my partner, she's a Gemini of 17 years. My best friend is a Gemini since I was 4. I just have a lot of knowledge when it comes to Geminis, a lot of life experience through friends as well. But I've been getting a lot of emails and messages about doing these type of videos, so I'm gonna throw it out there. And like I said, I'm gonna, if you like it, I'm gonna keep doing more and more. I'm gonna do every sign. I just like to mix it up a little bit. So 21 things you need to know about Geminis. Now, this is not part of the list, but Geminis are ruled by Mercury, so we're starting off with that piece of knowledge, and so that means they're the communicators, and makes them usually very intelligent. Now you'll see me looking down. I got notes all over my desk because it's so much information to remember. So don't mind me. So also Geminis are a mutable sign, very go with the flow. So it leads us to our first thing is Geminis jump from one idea to the next or one activity to the next very quickly. They're kind of, the way I like to put it is Geminis, when they realize they don't want to do something, they just stop doing it. Where some people can be, oh, I've invested this much time. Well, I'm going to keep investing time, even though I know I don't want to do it, even though I know it's a bad idea, even though I'm bored of it. I'm going to keep doing it, follow through. Some other people will be like that. Geminis are not like that. Which can be a good and bad sign, or a good and bad, depending on what you want to put it in. But I'm not putting this in pros and cons. I don't like that idea. So they do jump from one idea to the next. Like with Rose, I mean, she's always had a job, but she's had plenty of different jobs, and I feel like that's just kind of like a Gemini thing. Once they realize they don't like it, they're out. Some people will stick with it. For example, like my brother, he's a Taurus. My brother hates his job, but he's been doing it for the last 20 years. So number 2, Geminis can be very moody. They need their space. There's times when they just need their space. I mean, Geminis can be their own best friends, and sometimes they get in a mood and they just want to be alone and just deal with it themselves. It's not a reflection of you, their partner, or anything like that. And that's one thing it was hard for me to learn in the beginning with dating a Gemini, is that sometimes they just need their space, and it doesn't have anything to do with you. They just, whether they're dealing with something, some anxious energy, some bad news, whatever, sometimes they just need space, and you need to be able to give them that space. It's a priority. I don't know why I said priority, like it was 2 different words, but so yeah, I mean, it's very important for them to have their own space. You can't bombard them. Like with me and her, I feel like that's why we work so well, because I'm a Sagittarius, so I'm all about giving you your space if you need it. And I, like I said, it's one of those things where some people don't necessarily understand it, and that's why I'm doing this video, just to put some light on it. It's not always going to be about you. When they go get their own space, they just want their own space. And like I said, I mean, Geminis are known as the twins. So, I mean, like they said, they can be their own best friend, which leads us to point number 3. Thing that you need to know, number 3, the twins. Now, with Gemini females, they do have A lot of times you'll notice a little bit of a tomboy type quality. Because I always believe that a lot of people say that the twins are two females. I believe it's a male and a female at least, because I do feel like Geminis give off a really masculine energy. Not manly, just masculine. Like, they can be, they enjoy challenges, natural charisma. They can be assertive, emotionally reserved. You know what I mean? Like, they have that part of them, and they take charge as well. Like, they're not always going to be the follower. So if you can't let them drive sometimes, that'll drive them nuts. And I don't mean drive physically drive, but I mean like drive the idea. And now number 4, fascinating and unpredictable. You never know what you're going to get with a Gemini. A lot of times it's fascinating. But like I said, it can be a good and a bad. I'm not gonna put in the pros and cons. I'm just gonna put it out there. They can be unpredictable. You never really know what you're gonna get, and that's okay. It keeps it fun. I mean, Geminis don't like to be bored, and dating a Gemini is generally not boring either. But like I said, even within my relationship, sometimes I think I know her, and then sometimes I'm like, I don't even know what I was thinking. Like, I might, like, if she ever sends me out and I say, you want something, she's like, give me a snack. You know what I mean? Like, it's so, I don't know what snack it's gonna be. With me, if I send her out for a snack, it's usually a Snickers bar, because I love Snickers bars. That's my thing. I'm a creature of habit. But I don't know why I'm talking about me. Number 5, which kind of rolls from from the unpredictable to down for whatever. Geminis are down for whatever. It can be last minute, and you're just like, hey, let's go do this, and they just need to get ready. It's not about planning. It's not about, it doesn't have to be that way. It can just be, let's go. All right, where are we going? And it doesn't even have to be where we're going. Like, let's go. Like, there's plenty of times where I said to Rose, let's just go. And she doesn't even say where or to what or what are we going to do. Just, okay, just let me get ready. So we go. It's part of the versatility of Geminis, because they're very versatile. They can, and adaptable as well, so they can really adapt to anything. They're kind of a chameleon. They're kind of known as the chameleon of the zodiac, and that for that reason they can kind of just go with whatever, they go with the flow. Again, because of the mutable. Number 6, Geminis are a lot funnier than people realize. They're very humorous, but it's more of a dark humor. But Geminis is more of they like actual funny things, not forced, is what I found over my experience. Like, going to comedians aren't really, like, trying to make a Gemini laugh on purpose doesn't work as well as just being natural. Wittiness, something that just comes out of nowhere. From my experience, Gemini's like the, I don't know how to say it without sounding mean, like people falling or something like that. You know what I mean? Like something that isn't scripted. It's just real. They find humor in real things. Like I said, I've watched like comedians with Rose, and she doesn't find that funny. And I was even thinking of like Kanye when he was like that, there was somebody telling jokes in front of him, trying to make him laugh, and he was just straight facing it. Like, that wasn't funny to him. Kanye is a Gemini, by the way, for all you that don't know. Number 7, reads the room. You know, they're very good at reading the room. Very good. And they do it, it's kind of their routine. You know, they assess you. They assess your character. They assess your morals. They get to know you better from watching you. And if they like what they see, then they get closer. Do you know what I mean? It's more of a... And also reading the room, as in when they come into a room, they know what's going on. They can feel the vibe, so they know how to flow with it. But like I said, it's kind of a wallflower type energy. You know, they can come into a room and just kind of scope it out. Number 8. So, Geminis have a tendency of testing people. You know, to see how you react. You know, and I feel like it's something that they do to get to know you better. You know, put you in an uncomfortable, maybe even an uncomfortable situation, and see how you react. Because one thing about Geminis is once you have a Gemini, you have a Gemini, and they're loyal to you. But it's like almost putting through the test of making sure that you're worth their loyalty. You know, and it's a self-preservation thing. It's protecting themselves. You know, and they just, you know, because sometimes you're in a relationship with someone, and over time you would see people in different situations, so you get to know them. Gemini is kind of like, let's speed up the process. Let's see what you are, who you are in these situations. Let's do it now. But like I said, I mean, they reward you. When you pass the test, they reward you with loyalty. Number 9, they lose interest quickly. You know, like I said before, they don't like to be bored. You know, if something isn't doing what it was meant to do, then they kind of lose interest. You know, trying to think of an example. I didn't write that down. So basically, and it kind of goes from like what I talked about in the beginning, about jumping from one idea and one activity or a job even. You know, like I said, they lose interest. And once they lose interest, good luck getting it back, you know? Like I don't know how many times we started a movie, me and Rose, and 10 minutes in, she's on her phone. As an example. You know, and it's very hard to get their interest back once they've lost it. So, number 10, nosy. Geminis are very nosy. They want the tea. They want to know what's going on. Like if something's going on, they want to know what's going on. And then they gauge whether or not they're interested. You know, it could be some gossip going around and they just want to hear it. And then if there's nothing to do with them or they don't really care, they're over it, they're past it. But, you know, that type of thing, you know, wanting to know what's up. You know, if there's something to be told, don't ever say to a Gemini, oh, I was going to tell you something, but never mind. You know, like I said, it's curious, nosy. I'm just putting that out there. That's the word I put in. But like I said, they want the tea. They're interested until they're not. And see how these are rolling into each other. It loses interest quickly. Like if you give them the tea and they're not interested, you lost them. Number 11, Geminis have sharp tongues. Like they will cut you with their words if they're provoked. You know, they will say some shit to you. if you push them. And it's like I said, they'll cut you deep. So don't provoke them. Just kind of stay on the good side, because, like I said, I mean, they're intelligent and they're communicators, so they'll communicate intelligently to you what you may not want to hear. You mix some communicators and intelligence together, I mean, and then piss them off, you're asking for what you're going to get. But like I said, it's when provoked. Generally they don't do it without provocation. Number 12, like to be entertained. New ideas spark interest, and it piques their interest. If a new idea is something they're all about it. If you come up with an idea and you say something to a Gemini and you pitch an idea, or if they have a new idea, that piques their interest, they're in, and that's entertainment. Like I said, they like to be entertained, and they will entertain themselves if necessary. Again, with their own best friend. So yeah, I mean, I feel like with that, for example, I mean, there's times when me and Rose I'll be like, what do you want to do for this? Like, what are we gonna do for Halloween this year? And then, and then we call it like these like brainstorming sessions that we have, and we just kind of come up with ideas. And as long as she's entertained, as long as it piques her interest, she's in it, and she'll follow through. But once we start talking about something, like when I talk about watching a hockey game, I lose her. Number 13, zero tolerance. You got to meet their standards. If there's something about you that they don't see eye to eye on, that'll be an issue. Like if you're into drugs and they don't like drugs, that's an issue. If you like to drink and they don't like to drink, that's an issue. Or if they like to drink and you don't like to drink, that can be an issue. But even more so, more or less, like, if you're not on the same page about important things that are important to a Gemini, that's a problem. And it's just a matter of that's what it is. It can be big things like I want kids, you don't want kids, or it can be a small thing, like I said, like you do drugs or you drink. A smaller thing, obviously, than kids, but not a small thing. But like I said, zero tolerance. Like, especially if it's something that they're really against, then they moved on. 14. They can be very forgiving. I know a lot of people don't realize that about Geminis. Like, honestly, it's because most of the time when you've done something wrong, they're gone. So they're not really able to listen to you apologize. But they can be very forgiving as long as you're remorseful. As long as you're honest. Geminis love honesty. They are very honest. They're to the point, blunt, and they like it back. But like I said, if you've done something wrong to them, you can't just make it up by buying them flowers or chocolates or, buying them anything. You really got to be remorseful, and they got to know that you mean it when you say you're sorry. They don't just want to hear empty stories. But they can forgive. I know, like I said, a lot of people have that idea that, because Geminis, like I said, when you screw a Gemini over, they're usually gone. You're in the rear view. So there's really no forgiving. 15. So we had to talk about it at some point. Geminis are very sexually explorative. I mean, I feel like when they're with someone that they vibe with, they're very, very sexy, very, not a lot of boundaries when they're into you, when it comes to sex. Geminis are very ritualistic. They like the aesthetic. They like setting the mood in all aspects, but we're talking about the sexual side of it right now. There's things getting dressed up, sexy lingerie, we get some red candles going, some lighting, lots of foreplay. Just, they got to set the mood. They really like that. And it's real ritualistic. Like, they got to get themselves in the vibe. It's not just, they really like that. And not to say that you can't just have simple, straight, but to really enjoy it, that's how they enjoy it. It's a ritual. Along with, like I said, a lot of aspects of Geminis are very ritualistic. They like that. But like I said, when you're with the Gemini and they're into you, there's not many things they say no to. From my experience. 16, music. Again, going from ritualistic. Music is big for Geminis. It can set the mood. It can take them to a different place. Going back to needing space. A lot of times when, early on in our relationship, when we lived in a smaller place, we have a pretty big house now, but when we lived in a smaller place, she would throw her earphones on. And that's when I knew she was in her own place. But yeah, they do like, they use it to set the tone. And a lot of times, like I said, sometimes she'll put her headphones, even now she still does it sometimes, but she put her headphones on and she'll be there for hours. Just listening to music, dancing, Geminis, I always call her the gypsy. It's very gypsy-ish. With the, like I said, she likes the rituals. She likes listening to music to set the tone. The vibe. That's not all Geminis. That's my Gemini. But anyway, number 17. Geminis is, a lot of people don't realize they can be very jealous. The reason you don't realize it is because they're not around to tell you. Because they will hide it. They'll hide their jealousy. They'll even ghost you if you make them jealous. And they'll be off. You make them jealous. And like I said, they'll ghost you, but they'll even try to talk themselves out of being jealous. It's a funny little quirk. But they do get jealous. But like I said, usually if you made them jealous, they've ghosted you, or they go no contact with you. They won't tell you about it. They want to tell you about it, but they'll talk themselves out of it. Like I said, a lot of people really don't get the twin thing. The twin thing is just, it's so incredibly strong that like I said, they can be their own best friend. They can vent to themselves. You always see those cartoons where you have the good and the bad on each shoulder, and one's talking you to do bad shit, one's talking you to do good shit. It's kind of like that with Geminis. The other one's like, don't call him. You don't deserve it. Don't you call him. You know what I mean? Like, they're bouncing ideas off themselves. So, number 18. Geminis, a lot of times are accused of being two-faced, which I feel like it's more like 20. And I feel like that's why a lot of Geminis are actresses and actors, like Angelina Jolie, Mary-Kate and Ashley, Leah Remini. Because they are so diverse. Like I said, they are accused of being two-faced, but there's more like 20. The thing is with Geminis is sometimes, like, so that's a misconception with the two-faced thing. And that's something I want to set clear. Geminis aren't two-faced. Both sides are real. You know, two-faced is saying one thing but meaning another, like saying something to your face but saying something behind your back. That's different than that. Geminis are the same to you as they're not to you. Both sides are real. It's not like there's a fake side and a real side to Geminis, like two faces. Both faces are real. Number 19. If you think Geminis forget you're wrong. If you think Geminis forget you're wrong. Why is that? Oh yeah, if you think Geminis forget, you're wrong. I forgot to put a comma in there. They don't forget. Geminis don't forget. If you've done something to a Gemini, they don't forget. They keep a log, and they use it for ammunition. The one time you piss off a Gemini, you're going to hear about everything they've been holding in that little log. They don't forget. Geminis have a tendency of letting things pass, especially they don't want to screw up a vibe. Geminis can get in a vibe, and they don't want to screw that vibe up. So they won't screw it up with your bullshit. They'll wait, and then when you finally get them in that vibe, look out. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not in the mood to fight right now, so that stupid shit that you did that I want to tell you about, I'm going to wait till later when you do some more stupid shit that gets me to a point where I'm pissed. Then we'll talk about it all. That kind of thing. Just because they're not talking about it doesn't mean they're not thinking about it. Which leads us to number 20. Honest. Like I said before, Geminis are very honest, bluntly honest. And for some people that can be uncomfortable. They're very upfront. Like I said, I mean, when we talked about them testing you, they're upfront. They want to know that you can hang. If you're not for them and they're not for you, then that's okay. Move on. So they will be upfront and they'll be blunt. And sometimes it's too much for people. But then they know that's not that person isn't for them. Number 21, impulsiveness. Geminis can be very impulsive, which can lead to bad decisions. They don't always think it through. Sometimes they feel something and they just go. They go with the flow. And again, going back to mutable. Mutable signs are very much so like that. They're open-minded, but they also just go with the flow. In a moment, a Gemini can decide something and then all in to an extent. Which can lead to bad decisions. Like I said, in our relationship, for instance, there's been times when she wanted to do something, and instead of weighing all the options, most of the time she does, but sometimes she really thinks she wants to do something, she'll just go do it. And maybe regretted it later, but again, bad decisions. But it's just an impulsive reaction sometimes that you just feel something and you go with it. So, like I said, I'm not pointing out pros and cons. You can take this list any way you want. This is just things I feel like you should know. Now, for the most important, and now this isn't one of the 21, that was the 21. One of the most important things I really want to be, I wanted to point out was if you lose a Gemini, if you're watching this and you're trying to get your Gemini back because you did something stupid and lost them, there's a little secret. You may not like it, but I'm going to tell you. You got to be uncomfortably honest. It's the only way to get them back. And I'm not saying it's always going to work. I'm not saying that's going to work, but if you're uncomfortably honest, you have a chance. It gives you a better chance than if you're not. And what I mean by that is sometimes you just gotta be vulnerable. Sometimes you just gotta tell the truth. Because Geminis don't like bullshit. They don't like to be. They don't like to be lied to. You know, if anything, they like you to be an overshare. You know, and like I said, so if you've done something wrong, you got to be put yourself in an uncomfortable place and just be honest. You know, I know a lot of people don't want to hear that, but don't bullshit them. You know, because generally Geminis won't go back with their ex. Generally. I mean, like I said, we go back to number 14. They can forgive. They can. But you have to be remorseful. You have to be uncomfortably honest and direct and straightforward with them. You don't bullshit them. Because you'll just end up in the same place you were. But like I said, that's just a little tip for anybody that screwed it up. You know, because there is a chance. I know you'll look it up and it'll say Geminis get back with their exes, and generally no. There's always a chance. But like I said, if they care about you, they'll give you a chance. But they're not going to do it for you. You know, they leave the door open to squeak. And it's whether or not you can be honest and get through the door. But don't ever try to get a Gemini back with some bullshit. It ain't going to work. Me and Rose, we've had some issues, and we've broken up over the years a few times. Like I said, that's just from my experience. Just being honest, direct. You screwed up, admit you screwed up. You did something, admit you did something. You know what I mean? Like, being an oversharer is better than undersharing. Is basically what I'm getting at. That's where we're at. I hope you enjoyed that. Like I said, I'm going to do each sign. I just wanted to start with Gemini because it's usually in the Gemini video I get that messages and stuff too. Another couple small things. Geminis don't like to repeat themselves. Just little quirks. And if a Gemini is mad at you and they're telling you about yourself, that means they care. Because if they're mad at you and they don't care, they're going to tell you about them. They're going to tell you about yourself, but they're going to be gone right after. So if they're pushing you, it's because they see something in you. They will challenge you. They get the best out of you, because if they think it's there, they know it's there. They will go after it. They want the best for their partners. But it's on the flip side, the alternate side of that is that they'll be there for you. You know, they'll help you get to where you want to go. But again, it's one of those things where if you ask for help, they're gonna give you help. But you're gonna take it the way they're giving it to you. You know what I mean? You know, you may not like how they do it, but they have their processes, and they're gonna do the same with you as they do with themselves. But the repeating yourself, that's a big one. Sometimes I toy around and I like Rose says something, I'll say, what? Even though I heard her. Yeah. I hope this helps. You know, because Geminis, I'll be honest with you, the reason why I wanted to start with them is because they are one of the hardest signs. Because it takes a lot to really get to know a Gemini, but it's so worth it. You know, it's one of those things where it's not the easiest of tasks. But if you care, if you love them, it's worth it. And you're never really going to know. This is just a guideline. This is just some help. But you're never really going to know 100% because, like Rose always tells me, she doesn't even know herself 100%. Anyway, that's what I have for you. Be good. Take care. Stay safe.